All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We've all seen it happen, right? You put blood, sweat, and tears into a massive corporate rollout, you finally hit launch day, and then what? We're talking today about how to keep those huge change initiatives out of the project graveyard. The real test isn't the go live, it's what happens after. Did it actually work? And more importantly, did it last? You'd be amazed how many organizations completely dodge these two crucial questions once the confetti settles. If you look at the data, like the Project Management Institute's Pulse of the Profession, you'll see this glaring, persistent gap between projects delivered and actual benefits realized. Honestly, the biggest heartbreak is when a change does show a quick win, but then just fades. People slip right back into their old habits, and the company basically hits the reset button. To tackle this, we're going to follow a straightforward roadmap. 1. The change value gap. 2. Realizing true strategic benefits. 3. Measuring what actually matters. 4. Making the change stick. And finally, 5. Accountability and continuous learning. Starting off with Section 1, the change value gap, or moving beyond the J-curve regression. This brings us to a massive, much-needed paradigm shift. We have to stop just delivering projects and start generating a continuous value flow. Think about it. A project, it's temporary. It has an end date. It's totally focused on outputs. But a value flow, it's continuous. It's about outcomes. Without a deliberate effort after a rollout, you hit that dreaded J-curve risk. Things might look really good for a second, but the minute the project team leaves, those temporary structures dissolve. So we absolutely must reframe the metrics, the enduring roles, and really the whole rhythm by which we judge success. Moving right along to Section 2, realizing true strategic benefits and building the canonical chain. So benefits don't just magically appear out of thin air. They have to be hunted down. Enter what we call the canonical chain. This is brilliant because it lays out the exact causal logic of how value is actually created. Let's say you run a training session. Well, that's just an activity. The output is that people walk away with new skills. Because they have those skills, they actually use the new software. That's your outcome. Because they're using it, their work speeds up and errors drop. Boom, that's the benefit. And finally, those benefits roll up into better profitability or customer experience, which is your ultimate strategic value. But here's the kicker. Every single link absolutely depends on the one before it. A million outputs mean literally nothing if no one adopts them. Which naturally leads us to Section 3, measuring what actually matters. And crucially, avoiding those shiny vanity metrics. Now that we know how value is supposed to flow, how do we track it without falling for our own hype? You need a layered evidence base, because honestly, looking at just one metric is a recipe for disaster. You start with adoption. Are people even logging in? Then you look at behavioral indicators. What are they actually doing differently on a daily basis? Next up is capability. What new muscles has the organization built? And finally, performance. Did revenue or retention actually go up? You've got to mix these leading and lagging indicators to get the real story. And that brings us to a huge trap that boardrooms fall into all the time, the obsession with a single number. Specifically, return on investment. We love a good ROI, right? But claiming an ROI without that underlying evidence chain of behavior and capability changes we just talked about, that's just a wild guess, not a fact. An ROI is a total illusion if you can't explicitly trace the human behavior that actually drove that financial result. It perfectly illustrates Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. I love this quote because it hits the nail right on the head. It highlights the absolute danger of advocacy evaluation. When a project is measured just to prove it was a good idea, rather than to see if it genuinely worked. People start gaming the metrics just to look good. And when you over-rely on a couple of specific target numbers, you distort reality and ignore all the incredibly valuable stuff that isn't being explicitly measured. All right, Section 4, making the change stick, the structural counterpart to sustainability. We've all seen survivor syndrome, where the folks left behind after a big restructuring just lose all trust and check out. To stop that, you can't just cross your fingers and hope the new changes stick. You need real, hardwired structural anchoring before the window of opportunity slams shut. I'm talking about updating the actual standard operating procedures so this becomes the new normal. You have to literally hard code the IT systems, redefine roles, and reset performance targets. And honestly, none of this works unless leadership is visibly modeling the new behaviors. They have to walk the talk every single day. Which brings up this absolute classic 1995 quote from Kerr.
on the folly of rewarding A while hoping for B. It's a hilarious but kind of painful corporate tragedy. Think about it. A company announces this massive, collaborative strategic shift, but then keeps paying and promoting people based on their old, silo behaviors. I mean, if you want teamwork, but your bonuses are tied strictly to cutthroat individual sales targets, come on, you're absolutely going to get a reversion to the old ways. Your reward system has to match the change. And that takes us to our final section, Section 5, Accountability and Continuous Learning. Who owns the new reality? This right here is the glue that stops your expensive new change from completely falling apart. It comes down to learning loops. First, you need single loop learning, those quick, tactical tweaks you make to hit an existing goal. But you also desperately need double loop learning. That's when you actually step back and fix the flawed core assumptions when things aren't working. But here's the catch. Double loop learning is completely impossible without high psychological safety. People have to feel totally safe turning around and telling the boss, hey, the underlying strategy here is actually wrong. And structurally, you need this one vital piece, a named business owner for every single benefit, way after the go-live. And I don't mean a project manager who's going to get reassigned in 2 weeks. I mean a permanent business leader. Because when ownership lapses, the change just becomes everybody's general responsibility. And we all know what that means. It's nobody's specific accountability. Without clear, dedicated owners, going back to old habits isn't just likely, it's pretty much guaranteed. So as you wrap up your day and head back into the trenches, I want you to ask yourself this one critical question. Think about the biggest initiative rolling out at your company right now. Do you actually know who owns the benefits after the launch party is over? Because let's be real, hoping for sustainability is not a strategy. True value only happens when change is outcome disciplined, brutally honest with the evidence, and durably embedded into the foundation. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder exactly who holds the keys to your organization's future value.